All right, welcome back to another In Time Tech podcast. My name is Dan Puga, and today I had the pleasure of spending time with our state controller for the great state of Idaho, Brandon Woolf. We talked a little bit about how he got into state government, some of the work he's done in the area of transparency, specifically how to add transparency to the finances for state government. His work with his office and team that rolled out a statewide ERP called LUMA, and where he sees the future of Idaho in the next decade or more. Many people don't know this, but Brandon's not only a leader in the state of Idaho state government, but he also participates and leads national associations. And so it's just a pleasure to spend some time with Brandon. So sit back and enjoy our conversation. Another In Time Tech podcast, and I just am so excited to have our state controller, Brandon Woolf, join us today.
Thank you.
And maybe introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll get into some questions.
Great. Brandon Woolf from Preston, Idaho. My wife and I are from there. One thing I have in common with Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite is we were both student body presidents at Preston High School. So
Gotcha.
we love to tell stories of Napoleon Dynamite, and Crumble Cookies, also from Preston.
Okay.
But grew up there on a dairy farm. My wife was from town. We've been together since we were very young, and then went to Utah State for undergrad, moved up here for grad school, and started as an intern at the controller's office 28 years ago, and just had the opportunity to work in the office ever since, and was the chief of staff to the previous controller, Donna Jones, and she was in a horrible car accident. She survived, but she decided to concentrate on her recovery and her health, and then so she resigned and retired, and Governor Otter appointed me to finish her term. So that was back in 2012. And then I ran for office in 2014, 18, and 22. So that's kind of the short, quick version of where we've been.
Got it. Well, great. And so long-term Idahoan, raised out in the dairy.
Yep.
Love that. So, so share more about the state controller's job. Like, what is the state controller? What is it the state controller's office does?
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate asking that, because one of the things is that a lot of people have no idea. They're like, what does a controller do? What are you controlling? And I like to say, well, my wife controls me. She's the main controller, but jokingly. But no, the controller is one of the 7 constitutional officers for the state of Idaho: the governor, the lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, superintendent, treasurer, and the controller. The controller is one of the fiscal officers for the state. And I separate the controller from the treasurer in a way that you think of the controller as like the checkbook. We disperse the money. The treasurer is the savings account for the state. And the controller, we do a couple of key things. We pay all the employees, and we pay all the bills for all the state agencies. And one of the big pieces that have gone forward is the transparency. And I'm sure we'll get into that and talk about that, but that's a big push, as opening that up to a bigger discussion point of how important that is for the state.
Got it. Yeah, I remember back when there were paper checks, my tax returns from the state would come from the controller's office.
Yep. Yes. And one other key area is I sit on the land board as well with 5 of the constitutional officers. That's one where I get to make some policy decisions that are a lot different than the controller's office as like the accountant, chief transparency officer for the state. But the land board is a very important role as well. And again, later on, maybe in a different time, we could talk about that and the key aspects of what that is. But the land board is a big piece of helping the trust for the beneficiaries, which in a lot of the cases is the K-12 students. And the more money we can make off the state endowment lands, the better it is for the state of Idaho. So less tax dollars are having to be spent to help offset those education costs.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So you started as an intern, and you said how many years ago was that?
28 years ago.
28 years ago.
Yes.
And so you've probably done a lot of different jobs within the controller's office.
Yes, done quite a few. So I was intern, I was a training manager, spent most of my time in the payroll area, actually. Did training there, I was a bureau chief in the payroll area, project manager, and then I was a division administrator in the payroll. But that was a key piece, and we pay 37,000 employees, so it is a pretty good size thing. There's a lot of different nuances that happen with the statewide payroll.
Yeah.
Every 2 weeks, we're paying someone. We pay the universities. We pay judicial, which is on a monthly cycle. So we're always running a payroll every week for one of the state employees.
Gotcha. So over those 28 years, what's been like some of your favorite roles, or what do you like most about your current job even?
Yeah, my favorite though, I think, is truly just getting to know Idahoans. I love during the legislative session when there's citizens that come in from around the state to come visit the legislature. They come and stop by our office and have the opportunity to share what we do. Day in and day out, I take it, if we do our job quietly, and you think of your own accountant, you don't want them loud and boisterous and in the news or anything. You want it quiet, steady, calm hand, that someone you trust. And I hope that's what we can be. So I hope that we're that. And I wake up every day saying, I hope that we're setting the right tone, that if we do our job right, then we're helping all the other state agencies who do have a touch to the citizens on a daily basis. Whether it's a fish and game officer, a social worker, a correction officer, a state policeman. If we're helping do our job right, then they are able to do their job better and more successful and better customer service in their standpoint. So that's what, at the end of the day, you always talk about customer service. You talk about it in your role here at In Time Tech, but it's so important. It's more than just words, and it's the actions that back that up. And love having that opportunity to help state employees or citizens get to where they're trying to get to. If sometimes we may have to say no, but it's helping. What are you really trying to get to? And if we can help solution that, that's the best part of all.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. You mentioned trust, and some of our core values, two of them are trust and transparency.
Yeah.
So we'll switch gears a little bit into transparency. Transparent Idaho, it's been a really successful program for the controller's office. Like, what was the catalyst for Transparent Idaho? How did it get started?
Well, I think you nailed it on the head with trust. And I remember seeing a graph, and this graph showed, it's from the Pew Research Center, and it shows the amount of people that trust their federal government to do the right thing. And it started like 1958, and it went up to a peak in 1964 to 77%, and then it's just dropped off. And to me, that was a case of, you look at finance and government together, and the trust is super low. And so to me, it was working with our team. We're like, what can we do? How can we help? How can we build trust in the state of Idaho, or at least the controller's office, and what we do, and build a little bit of trust back in what there is? And so that was the main part, was building trust. It was kind of a buzzword that was going around the other state controllers that I partner with and work with on a daily basis, and the 50 states. And they were building or working on something similar. And so that's where we built our first transparency page, Transparent Idaho, back in 2013.
Wow.
It was all PDFs. You can only imagine that now today PDFs are great for certain things, but not for looking at a whole bunch of data. But that was kind of the initial points, was building trust, and how do we help open the books here in Idaho? How can we do our part? And you look at how can we be more data-driven so that decision makers can make their decisions off of those policies, that as they make those policies, it's data-driven. How do we deter fraud, or how do we change a culture to openness, and maybe even say we're more accountable? Those are the key things, I think, as we look forward or go forward to help build that transparency. And that was all the beginning parts of it all.
Gotcha. And that would have been a year after you took office then?
Yeah,
So
it was just a couple
underway.
months.
Oh, a couple months, okay.
Yeah. So I worked with, at that time, Governor Otter helped me as we rolled out the very first one in January of 2013. We just had state data. That was the beginning, and their state employee pay rates and some of the transactions. That was the beginning. So it was a shoestring. We used some of our savings and some of our IT staff at that point to help build that first initial transparency page.
Got it. And how has that evolved over time?
Wow. Incredible, so much. And, we've had a partnership with a couple different groups. One was OpenGov, as they had a piece where they're being able to help show the data. And the other has been In Time Tech, has been a huge partner in relation that way of, one, how do we make the data more consumable? How do we make that easier to see? How do we do that and drive that? And it wasn't one of the key things. It was making the data more visual, appealing.
Mhm.
How do you consume that? Because there's millions of rows of data. How do you help the end user try to get to down that rabbit hole of what they're really trying to get to? And both of those partners were super helpful with our team to help get it to a point where you could slice and dice the data and visually quickly get to an area you're trying to get to. And so as we've evolved from that 2013 PDF pages, today we have a very dynamic, robust website that's, my vision was always, how do we get to the more data, more locales, more local governments? And as we've added that partnership in particular with In Time Tech has been super helpful. Of one, we did some case studies, we did some user studies to what's most beneficial as they're on a website, to how do they get to it, how do they find it. And so that was super helpful in the design and the layout and the structure that way.
Got it. And I can speak on behalf of In Time Tech. It was always a pleasure. It has been a pleasure always
Yeah.
working with your teams. Really great folks who are really committed to that trust and transparency,
Definitely.
and really committed to Idaho. I'm curious, where does the data come from that you use in Transparent Idaho?
Yeah. So there's millions of rows, as you mentioned. A lot of it comes from our in-house system, from our LUMA system, our state data, and then our second, and we get from 44 counties, 198 cities, 193 school districts, and over 900 taxing districts. We get that data from them called Central Registry. So they load and give us the data. And then from the school districts, we just actually loaded, in partnership with In Time Tech, we loaded a lot of information about the school districts. So all of their financial transactions for the last 2 years. So we get that feed from the Board of Education. The school districts submit their data to the state board, and then it's one pipeline from the Office of State Board of Education to our office. So there's a lot of data, and our part is how do we go forward of how do we make that easier for the user to get to, and when there's so much there to go through.
And it's a heavy effort normalizing that data because it's
Yes.
coming from all sorts of different sources and shapes and sizes and
Exactly. And as a IT person that truly gets that world, that was the big piece that we had to spend a lot of time on, is that normalization or standardizing. How does Ada County record it here versus Kootenai County or Twin Falls, or this city versus this city? How do we standardize that data so you can be consistent and you can compare?
Mhm.
And then that's what makes it easier then to, hey, how does Boise City compare to Napa, to a Caldwell, to a Twin Falls, or to, Star, a smaller town? How do you do that? And if you can switch that to a percentage, now you can truly see, okay, well, they're spending this amount on public safety compared to another one. And when you have that standardized, that makes it easier to trust the numbers.
yeah, I've got to believe it makes a big difference when they're going out for bonds,
Yes.
and looking for funding to see like there really is a need, and how do the different counties stack up? I mean, I've used it. You can dig down to police, fire. You can look at, I mean, all sorts of different ways of dissecting the data. And one of my favorite quotes from you is, I think you said, "I want anybody from a third grader to my grandmother to be able to find what they're looking for on the
Yes,
site."
that's
And
exactly.
and it really is a great site.
Yeah. In fact, just this weekend, I was meeting with several county officials and county commissioners, and they were like, we love it because we use it all the time. Or there were some citizens that are like, we always go to county meetings or city council meetings, and they can hold them more accountable and say, well, no, this is how much you just showed in your last report that you gave to the controller, is that you spent this much on, this many millions on XYZ. Having that accountability. And I think having more citizen engagement. I don't think we participate. There's so much going on in our lives nowadays. And I get it. I am too. I mean, but you say, how many people participated in the last city council budget setting? There's not too many people that come to participate to see how their money's going to be spent. And it's their hard-earned tax dollars. So if there's ways that we can help open the books and they don't have to come in, or make that easier to evaluate or look, or just say, hey, I see we spent this. is that right? And that it at least spurs the conversation to have a good policy discussion.
And the relative comparison helps too,
Yes,
right? We're not
exactly.
that far off, or wow, we're really far off, and
Right.
one a good way or the other way, either works. So yeah,
And in a way where you can say, wow, they look like they're doing a really good job. How are they doing that? I can give them a call. Hey,
yeah,
city XYZ or county or taxing district, you only spent this much money. How are you doing that? We're spending this much. How can we get some best practices? Or what are you doing? Did you privatize or did you change this or did you do a new contract?
yeah.
And I think that goes a long ways of being a good business side minded of we're using the taxpayers' dollars here. How do we spend it that right way?
Wonderful. Well, no, I appreciate that. You mentioned LUMA a little bit
Yes.
earlier, and I know LUMA's been in the news over the last couple of years,
Yeah.
off and on, talking it, and it's a very, very large undertaking. I mean,
Right.
as a technologist, I mean, when I hear that there's an ERP being replaced or being consolidated, I'm like, I mean, you're literally, it's like massive brain surgery. Like you are doing a massive, massive,
Yeah.
massive overhaul. Um, can you share? So, what is LUMA?
Yeah. So LUMA, we is the just the name of our project and of our new system that we have going forward. It's a modern ERP, and people are, what's ERP? Enterprise Resource Planning, but it's basically the state's financial, budget, procurement, HR, and payroll system for the state. And it's an opportunity of where we were able to, um, I would say, in the sense of eliminate up to about 80 other accounting systems that were existing. So they were all these state agencies have their own accounting systems, and they were able to merge onto one. And those are big. That's a big change. One, we changed their system. Two, we changed the chart of accounts. We changed from cash to accrual. So we really moved the
Oh,
cheese a
wow.
lot.
Okay.
And so, as you said, and we are the first and only state at this point that has gone live with a full GovCloud, full ERP system, full modules, and it's fully implemented and working at this time. And we're super excited for that.
Yeah.
And it's a long time coming. It was a big project, as you mentioned, and those that have been in the business world know they take a lot of effort, a lot of work, and a lot of change management and understanding and training and all those things that go with it.
Yeah. When in systems I've been a part of, there's so many undocumented, kind of off the
Yeah.
table things happening that you just don't even know what you're going to get yourself into as you're starting to roll one of those things out. And I've got to imagine that you also tightened up some of those processes, so money was where it was supposed to be. It was more easily tracked. I mean, do you have some examples?
Exactly. I think those are spot on of being able to say, um, our old legacy systems were old mainframe systems that were put in the late 80s. And our main reason why we went forward with all this was to look for ways to, again, the standardization, just as we were talking on transparency, was the standardization, the consolidation of efforts, more transparency. And with all this allows and the new modern technology, and what you see going on daily as a technologist, you know how much is changing day by day or week by week. And being able to keep up with that's what's so important for us now, being able to go forward, as well as the concern of cybersecurity. I think we have a huge target on us, and probably even more so of what's happening in the news, current news today, of what's going on globally and what's impacting us. We saw, in fact, just to deviate for a second, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the increase, we had an 8,000% increase in the attacks on our office. Little state controller's office of Idaho had that big of an increase of the number of attacks. One were government and two were finance, thinking we have money. So those are things of what we shore up and see those differences. Being able to have a more modern chart of accounts, a more modern system that adapts and is flexible. And for example, you asked as an example, last year, it was such a fun time as we were experiencing and going through our first year. We've been live now for 2 years. Here this July will be 2 years. Last year, the legislature made the decision to change our health insurance carrier.
Oh, wow.
So we switched from one carrier to another during open enrollment. So we did open enrollment and switched insurance carriers for 37,000 employees. That's a big effort. on our old legacy system, that would have taken about 18 months of programming to switch and do all that work. With our new system and all the flexibility of the configuration, it only took us 2 months to do the programming, the redesign, and we were up and running, and it was very successful. And we did it again. This just had closed our open enrollment. So those are examples. They don't get talked about. They're not going to be in the news or things like that. But those are huge savings, huge examples. And we've built the foundation. And I think it's being able to the trajectory of where we go from here. Yeah. And it's interesting to see, and I totally get it, of where employees that have been here, like myself, 25, 30, 35 years, it is a big change. But you look at some of these employees that are just coming out of accounting school, they're just flying and picking it up, and it just makes total sense. So those are the things we continue to, when they get put in, we're continuing to look for those efficiencies, make it as faster, smarter, better, more intuitive. Maybe there's an extra button or a click here or there where we can reduce those. And those are things that we're looking at now.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You mentioned the cybersecurity side.
Yeah.
And there's also employee retention and hiring. I mean, it's hard to find folks who actually know how to work on a legacy system. If you're on a mainframe, I mean, there's not a lot of COBOL programmers that are wandering the streets these days. So that also has to have had a big impact on this 2-month to 18-month kind of rollout.
You're exactly spot on. I mean, you tossed up a perfect thing where I joke about we almost have to go recruit. And I say this jokingly, but we almost have to go recruit at a nursing home for people that know how to do COBOL to help support what we were doing on our old mainframe. We had lost all of our key people that had been the business developers and the application developers on the COBOL and the mainframe work. So we can point and say that's a reason we needed, but that's one of them, but it wasn't the main reason or anything that way. But it's so critical.
Yeah. It's and 16 months of developer time across a team of folks is a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
And time, like just the resources required to manage all that. So,
and you brought up another great point too, Dan. I think you look at retention and recruitment. You probably see that so much in what you deal with here at our state level. One of the key things is obviously from a technology standpoint. During COVID, our technology team was getting recruited and headhunted daily. They could stay in Boise and work for a Silicon Valley company and make 3, 4, 5x of what we could offer and pay. How did we keep people on our LUMA project? That was a big thing. How do we get them to stay on and continue and be an expert and help? And that was a big, I felt a success for what we were able to do and maintain and keep. Now we're losing some because they're going to other state agencies, but I say high tide rises all boats. And so if they're able to go to another state agency, it's a success because it's helping that agency, it's helping us. And we continue to recruit and try to retain those. In a financial area, it's a real struggle right now. The number of CPAs coming out of school has just dropped off. Yeah. And from that financial area where we're really struggling. And so our key area is how do we help? And that's kind of maybe a thing for the future is how do we develop that farm system? If we used a baseball analogy, how do we build up our farm system to have that strength in the future?
Yeah. We do some work in other states as well. Mm-hmm. And I can attest, I mean, they've tried these ERP implementations. Some of them have been sitting there for 5-6 years and they've never gone live. Yeah. And it's just it's an entire waste of tax dollars. So it's so exciting that, I mean, it's painful, I'm sure. And you shared a few things about challenges, but what were some of the key challenges your team faced in that rollout and implementation?
Some of the challenges I talk about is, I wish we had done better with our change management to help even further and more than what we ever did. I don't think you can ever do enough. It's that people side. You can select whatever technology. I mean, yes, you want to have the right technology. Take that for sure. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the people. Mm-hmm. And I see you have that on your sign, people first and how important that is. But it's that change management, that understanding, that was so valuable. And the training. We need to continue to offer more and more training. I wish we had done more at the beginning and continue to do that. Those are things that we're working on, is continuing to have more education, more understanding, the resources to make it understandable, helpful for the users. Those are things I look back of what I wish we could have done better or continue to work on. Reporting It's interesting you sit there and think, but how critical reporting is, or to know a financial report is so critical for a fiscal officer or for an agency director. And as we really step back to say, okay, let's make sure our data is correct. It's reconciling, it's report, and that this report matches up with what the system shows and building that. And so I've been personally sitting in on those weekly meetings on the reporting side to get that up to speed, to make sure our reporting is in the right place and right structure. So those are some of the key areas that we're working on and continue. You mentioned some of the other states. I want to touch on that for a second. There was 2 or 3 states that are our neighbors to us, and I won't say their names, but one state did finally go. They started the same time we did with the project. One state has only gone live with just the accounts payable in the financial area. They haven't done anything else, and they actually backed off and went to a whole different vendor. Another state started the exact same time, and they have still not gone live with anything. They're hoping maybe in 2030.
Wow.
In 5 more years, maybe they might have financial. And at that point, it'll be 5x the budget of what they had projected. We came in, our budget we had projected was 102 million. We came in at 93.
Wow.
And so we tout that.
That's
and
great.
want to say that is the thing. Now we've had to continue to pay for that change in modernization since then, after we've gone live. And so I want to really hit that we did come in on time. We were a few months off, but we did come on under budget. From a government big project like that, a massive size, we were pretty excited to have that. And again, I want citizens to know that we looked at that. It's not my dollars. Right. It's all of our sacred tax dollars, that it was spent judiciously the right way, and that we really watched that. And we watched that weekly to make sure where we were tracking.
I know you mentioned some neighboring states, but you also have a key role in one of the national associations and representing Idaho. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I had the opportunity to be the president of the National State Controllers Conference Association. I did that back in 2020, and I'm currently serving as the president for the bigger umbrella, which is the National Association of State Auditors, Controllers, and Treasurers. And it's an exciting time. It's partnering. One of the things is in the public sector, we really get to share ideas.
You're not competing, right?
We're not competing, so we can share and say, hey, this worked for us, this didn't. You can plagiarize still and get the best ideas from other states. Or like, hey, they're doing a great job. What are they doing? And we can pick up the phone and call. And I think that's what's super valuable of having this organization. I can call any one of the other 50 state controllers and say, hey, what are you doing? How are you handling this? What's going on here? And it's been a super exciting and fun time to be part of that association and help out. And one, too, is these ERP systems, these financial modernization efforts. It's fun to coordinate with one another and share ideas. I've shared with Georgia, with Missouri, with Florida, with Washington, Nevada, so many other states of here's what we experienced. This went well. Here's to watch out for this. And those you can't put a price on. And we did the same thing when we first started. I checked with Alaska, with Massachusetts, with Arizona. They were our mentor, and they did an on-prem solution. So we were the first one, and so everyone's watching us. And so with it being a cloud-based and a gov cloud, so it's just a tighter security. And then, as you know, it's so much more fun of that gov cloud versus a commercial cloud and the security and tightness there. But we needed to make sure we had that data in the right spot.
Oh, wonderful. It's you've shared that you also have connections outside of the U.S. with other controllers and like you shared, it's not like the different states are competing with each other. There really are, like you said, the high tide rises all ships mindset of how do we all get better at our jobs. So it's just great that you've had that experience of those leadership roles and the connections that get made. Makes a real difference.
Along that lines real quick was with the U.S. State Department, but with Transparent Idaho and some of these other with the controller's position, I've had a lot of connections with the country of Mexico and all their state controllers. And I've probably visited with maybe, 15, 16 different other countries where they've come into Boise or we've done a remote to share about Transparent Idaho. And so I think that's been a great thing, that not just here in the Idaho, not just the U.S., but to share and have a good conversation about what is um, public dollars and how they're being spent and all of that. And so it's been fun to discuss and share that with someone from Uganda or Cameroon or Brazil, or even this last one was from Lebanon, actually. So, and trying to make those connections, they're like, hey, can we learn how you did it, and what can we do to build something similar? So it's been a super exciting experience.
Wonderful. Where's the next conference at?
Oh, well, the next one is actually here in Boise. So by being president, we get to host, and we get to show a little bit of Idaho. So we're going to show them the blue turf down at Boise State, and then we're actually going to block off the basket block downtown there in Boise and have a good bass celebration the other night. So we're looking forward to that. So for the attendees, it's in August. So we'll see how the weather is. We'll see if it's a little smoky and how hot it might be, right?
Yeah.
But we're excited to host. We'll have probably about 500-600 people will be here, and look forward to having all of our peers come.
What a great testament to the work you've done over 28 years, and then being an ambassador for the great state of Idaho, both in serving in these national associations and then bringing people in. And it's fantastic. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, talk like the future. So considering all the roles and functions, how did you see your role and the role of your office changing or evolving into the future?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think it's always a good question what's that vision? What's that strategy or vision future? And one, I think we continue to look for, how do we develop the financial team members at the state? As we talked about a few minutes ago, the number of CPAs coming out or sitting for the CPA has just dropped off. The number of going into accounting in the state has dropped off. It's building those relations with the universities here in Idaho. It's even building that down to the high school, maybe middle school level. Hey, do you like math? Do you like doing numbers? Do you like business? Is there opportunities? I don't think you can start at the college. You have to start even earlier, and probably the same thing you've experienced on the technology side, right?
Yes, we got to get to them in elementary school and get them.
You have to.
Like the hour of code and going out to the elementary schools and getting them interested, for sure.
And so I think that's the spot on. How do we start earlier and those relationship building there? We're looking at, how do we do shared service? Shared service models have been existing for decades in big companies, but is there a right role in place for how we can share financial shared services at the state level? Does an agency that has 10 people, do they need to have a fiscal officer? Well, they probably wear many hats, right? They're the fiscal officer, they're the HR, they're this, they're this, they're this. If there are opportunities, not to take over all of them, but if there's opportunities of areas where our team has those expertise and knowledge, maybe that's something in the future. And we're doing that right now for about 7 or 8 agencies where we offer those services. We can expand on that. And our knowledge of what we already know of the system of LUMA and all the other things that we deal with, we can help out. And we can do it for a short term, or we can look for a long term. And of course, my biggest push is where we go with transparency. I look for the future of where AI can drive that, where we can add more data. How do we make that data more visually appealing? How do we, and back to grandma, how do we make this easy? I was just talking with a person in a meeting right before this, and they're like, I love it, but there's so much data. How do I dive in and find it? So I think we have to continue to look for ways of, even my drive here to Meridian, I was looking, how do we build on that? How do we make that easier? And I think that's probably a partnership with several in the technology area of, how do we make that easier for the user when there may be hundreds of millions of rows? And I think that's where AI, whether you love it or hate it, I think it plays a role. And I think there's an area there where we can continue to build on that to say, how do we make this more appealing, more visually appealing, or being able to say, oh, wow, as I compare this, an example of the 30 million rows of education data, how do we make that so we can compare a school district to another? How much are they spending on the administration? How much are they spending on facilities? How much is being spent on transportation, on the federal grants? How much is actually going to the teachers and the students and for their learning? Compare that from school district to school district, let alone even begin to look, comparing that to test results. or per capita spend. I think that's our first opportunity there of how do we continue to shine the light. Maybe it's on roads built, so how much per mile is this costing? Adding more metrics that way, maybe more demographic data to tie it in. And one thing we've been asked is how do we compare to other states? Mm-hmm. They're like, hey, this is great. We have it in Idaho. We just moved here from California, from Oregon, from Washington. Do they have this? Or why don't they have this? Or how can we compare? Or even how does our state now compare to another state by these things? So I think there's always opportunities, and we continue to show, again, honest, integrity, calm, steady hand at the wheel at the controller's office is what I want to provide and continue to give the citizens to let them know we're in good hands, and that we want to do things the right way. Those are the visions and directions. All these things I've shared.
I the evolution from PDFs to graphical views has been tremendous, and I've met with a few folks from your office off and on, and when we talk about AI, people, it's hard to maybe envision it, but can you imagine just going to a site and just asking it questions?
Yeah.
I don't even have to click around. It's like, how much does Ada County spend on blah, blah, blah? Boom, gives you that. Can you put that in a pie chart for me? It just, that's the kind of power of the AI tools that they give you the ability to just ask it normal questions and have it actually reply back to you instead of hunting around. Even with the beautiful graphics, it's so nice to just ask it what you're looking for instead of clicking around. So
Exactly.
I can see that your office is definitely visionary in the conversations I've had with them. So
yeah.
What other areas do you see? Like the controller's role does definitely evolve over time.
Yeah.
Right. And what do you see for the state of Idaho in the future? Areas of opportunity?
Oh, I think there's, this whole AI work, this transparency piece, sitting on the land board, I think there's great opportunities of how we move the state forward. I think there's areas of how we set ourselves up for the future. I mean, we can think about today, we can think about next week. I think a good, strong visionary leader also is planning for the future. How are we setting this best up for our kids and our grandkids? And how do we prepare that, and how do we design that and do that? How do we set ourselves up structurally that we have a good foundation? We always talk, a good firm foundation that's strong and hold. And I think those are the future things of whether that's the land board, setting us up that we can do that as we make the right decisions, policy there of how we structure that. Financially at the controller's office, do we have a good rainy day fund that budgetarily that the legislature and the governor who do an excellent job of setting us up. Our role is watching more from an appropriation that they don't overspend once they've allowed and appropriated the money. Ours is to watch how they're spending that and tracking that. Ours is how do we continue to build that infrastructure, because we're going to continue to grow. And we see that daily here in our lives as we travel, and us for native Idahoans, we see that the growth and the traffic and the homes. But someone moving in, maybe that is a lot different because traffic's nothing compared to where maybe they moved from. So how do we make that the right sense and have the right growth, good growth, the right structure? And as a controller, I feel in the sense of how do we help do that from the standpoint from a financial, again, instead of having 1,400 websites to go to, as we can help the citizens be engaged, be part of the process, be involved. I love seeing that. And that's one of the other websites we built. It's called townhall.idaho.gov to allow citizens to go see where a board or a commission or a meeting is taking place, that they can participate, whether they're in Bonners Ferry or in Bear Lake. They don't have to come to the great state of Ada. They can subscribe and say, oh, there's a meeting for Fish and Game on these units.
Gotcha.
And you can pop in, you can see it visually and watch the remote meeting and say, oh, there's the agenda. I want to listen to this. So how do we help the citizens become more engaged? We're a quicker, faster data information. How can we provide that to make it easier for the users and the citizens?
Awesome. Anything else you want to share in closing? We're about out of
time.
And I really enjoyed this conversation with you.
It's been fun to visit with you, Dan. And I just say thank you. One is that partnership and relationship with In Time Tech's been excellent to have that. It's one of, I think, just helping citizens know things are in good hands, and that we're good and well-meaning things of for here in Idaho. I feel that the citizens need to hear those elected officials. I don't like to use the word politicians. I just feel but to say a public servant, public officials that mean well, they're trying to do the best they can to help, collaborate, that work hard, and try to, and thanks to those that have supported them and voted for them or put them, elected them to be in those roles. I feel it's a sacred trust to be in that, to help coordinate how their money's being spent. And if there's any ways of, I guess I would open it this way. I would love feedback from whether it's, employees here, employees there, or wherever, or citizens here in Idaho. Give us your feedback. What more information could we provide, or how can we make it a better mousetrap? And that's what, at the end of the day, how we can continue to improve and be better each day. And I think that's what makes us successful. So I just want to say thank you and appreciate the time and this relationship. So thank you.
Yeah. And now I have one extra question.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
You mentioned that we're in good hands. Many citizens, I don't think, know the budget requirements within the state of Idaho, like how the budget gets set. Is a balanced budget.
Yeah.
Can you share a bit more about that? Because there's a lot of states that are way out of whack these days, and most people don't really know that constitutionally that
I'd love to share that.
Yeah.
And there's a fun thing. There's not I don't know if there's even a store here in Idaho anymore, but if you think of the old 7-Eleven.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's actually Article 7, Section 11 of Idaho Code.
Oh.
Says that we cannot spend more than we have. Wonderful. So it's an easy one to remember, even right exactly where it is in the Idaho Constitution, that we cannot spend more, just like what we should be doing in our homes.
Right.
That's in 49 states have that, either in code or their constitution that says they can't spend more or need to have a balanced budget. But do they?
Right.
And I think that's where the rubber hits the road and where we do things the Idaho way here. We live within our means. We save for rainy days. Governor Otter and Lieutenant Governor always talk about, I think it's Lieutenant Governor Bedke's great-grandpa or someone always had the saying, it's not the bad years that are going to put you out of business, it's the good years.
Right.
And you think about that when you have a great harvest as a farmer or rancher. Do you go out and buy your new F-150 or a new John Deere?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's those years of where you save up. It's during those tough years that what makes or breaks. And I think here in Idaho, we do a good way of balancing our budget, living within our means. The numbers have come out the last week. The governor's talked about tightening the belt, preparing, may or may not be there. Right. The revenues still are a lot higher. We have to make sure what we understand there is that forecast. Mm-hmm. We're forecasting here. We came in a little bit less than that, but we're still way above and year over year continuing to grow. The legislature's done a great job of tax cuts, and the governor's signing. So we continue to see those things. I think as citizens, you still have to be grateful for living here in Idaho, doing it the right way, that we're not having this cyclical like this of ups and downs. That's maybe a little bit, but we're continuing that trajectory upwards. And I think that's a great part of our budget here in Idaho, for at least the state government, that I can speak towards that way.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you.
Appreciate
it, Brandon. It's
Thank you.
And great talking with you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks for watching this In Time Tech podcast. If you'd like to learn more about what we can offer you, please visit our website, intimetech.com, where you'll be able to see the different capabilities and technologies we could provide you in your business. Also, don't forget to subscribe and follow us to get more amazing content like this. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.